Hi, my name's Philip Baer, and I'm bringing you into a conversation that's been going on for a couple of days between myself and a woman who I've been messaging with through Facebook, who lives in England and has been struggling to deal with issues of anger and rage. And we're at the part of the conversation where the underlying triggers for that anger and that rage are coming to the surface. And so the conversation's taking a little bit of a different turn now. And I was thinking that you too would be interested in hearing my response to what she writes. And I really have to appreciate this woman, and I can't share her name, unfortunately, for being so honest as a parent in describing a situation that I'm guessing every parent has experienced in at some time or another, if not throughout the experience as a parent, and if not as parents, then as children of someone who would exhibit these behaviors. Now, I'm coming not from a place of the expert parent who's done everything perfectly in my own life. My daughter's now 20 years old, and I have to say that she will be spending the remainder of her life putting together or putting patches on some of the things that I wish I had known 10, 15, 20 years back. I would have avoided some of the harm that I caused to her, not because I'm an uncommitted or bad parent, but because I simply didn't understand, and I don't think anybody really understands, that these dynamics exist, and yet they define almost everything about our life during childhood and once we grow up. So here's an extract from the conversation that I find intriguing and just so wonderful, because it expresses the real heart of conflict between parent and child, or the stress that a parent experiences with their children. So what's written here refers to the ability or the desire to be able to sense early signals that would allow her to stop her rage before it gets out of control. And she goes on to say, occasionally I can do this, and I know others who do it too. But what's interesting with my anger is that it's so often aimed at my eldest son, who is challenging, and it's when he gets into one of his meltdowns that I often get triggered, but not always. I won't say how old he is, and it feels like when he starts up, I actually want to disconnect or to run away rather than to connect to this child. So what we're hearing about over here is a phenomenon that is absolutely pervasive. And it's a phenomenon where a parent is turned away or turned off by some attribute, some behavior that their child is exhibiting. And there's a really good reason for that. When we enter the world as a young child, our parents, in order to protect us, in order to allow us to effectively function within the society that we're going to be living in, need to guide us in a way that discourages us from doing things that one would consider antisocial behaviors, and encouraging us to do behaviors that are considered okay, normative, or desirable within our culture, within our family. And essentially what I'm saying is that we don't come into the world to be embraced with love unconditionally. Our entrance into the world is into a world that embraces us with conditional love. So that conditional love is available when we're doing the things that are being encouraged by our parents, and it's withdrawn in order to keep us safe when we're not doing the things that our parents encourage, when we're doing things that our parents discourage. Not only when we're doing things, but when we're being in particular ways. So, for example, in almost all of the families that we'll encounter, selfishness will be discouraged because that's an antisocial attribute. It's an antisocial behavior. And so whenever we're encountering someone who is behaving selfishly, or whenever we're encountering our child behaving in a selfish way, we're likely to discourage them from doing so. We're likely to discourage them from lying. We're likely to discourage them from stealing, from touching their genitals in public, from playing with feces. All of these things because they're unsafe for many reasons. And if we do them, we would be rejected. If the child does them, they would be rejected in society. So we polarize our child by letting them know that they can do certain things and that it's not safe for them because they'll be rejected if they do those other things. Now, there's a bit of a problem with this, and I'm going to show you what that problem is. So in order to do so, I'm going to use this balloon. So give me a moment and I'm going to inflate it. So what I'm about to show you is why this mom is having so much of a problem and feeling the need to withdraw from her child, getting angry with her child. If we were to look at behaviors that a child might have or attributes that a child might have, one of the things that we could write on here is that the child can be kind. So we may encourage a child to be kind, but the idea of the balloon is that on the opposite side of the balloon, for every attribute that we have, there's an equal and opposite counter attribute. So if we have kindness, we also have, and so do our children, cruelty. So kindness and cruelty are polar opposites. We could say the same thing about neediness. If our child is needy, that child also has a propensity to be independent. One of these we're likely to encourage, one of these we're likely to discourage. We might have a child who is tidy, and on the opposite side of that, we would have their untidiness. Now, the challenge with the things that are being discouraged in our lives is that there's so much risk of disconnection when we are doing those kind of things. So if, for example, we were to talk about our perversion, if we were to talk about our wrath or our rage, those are things that are generally discouraged. And if we're not able, or what happens when we do that is we bury these parts of ourselves, and we bury them very deep because we know that we're going to get rejected if we exhibit those parts of who we are. And one of the ways that I help to work with people on this is by using the following chart. And give me 1 second to see that you can see this. And this chart shows or allows people to write down in the yellow section all of those things that they were encouraged to do. And in the blue section, all of those things that they were discouraged to do. So the things that we were encouraged to do made us desirable within the culture. The things that we were discouraged from doing made us undesirable. Not only did other people reject us if we were to do those things, we learned to reject those parts of ourselves. Now, in the case of this woman, here comes a young child who has every single one of the attributes, no matter which side of the balloon it's on. Their independence is matched by their neediness, their cruelty by their kindness, their happiness by their sadness. Everything has its polar opposite. And we would love to be able to keep only those parts that we like. But I'll show you what happens if you try to only keep a part of it. That's what, if we try to take those two pieces apart, that's exactly what happens. When we're seeing our child being in a way that we consider to be threatening, when we consider it to be related to disconnection, in other words, on that chart I showed you, the blue, our nervous system perceives that as a threat. They're doing something that is going to get them disconnected from society. We associate that disconnection with something that's unsafe for us too. And we've repressed it and put it down all of these years. So what we're getting to see is a mirroring of something that we've had to disown in order to protect ourselves. And so what our nervous system does in a situation like this, it has two main choices. It has to get away from that potentially ostracizing situation. And the one way that it can do that is to run away. And in the messaging that I got, one of the words that was used is that I actually want to disconnect and run away, not connect. So that speaks exactly to what I'm trying to say over here. So that's the flight response. If we're talking in terms of stress responses, we know that the main other one, apart from freeze, if you're not fleeing, then we're fighting. And that's when our anger comes up. That's when our uncontrollable rage comes up. So we see our child doing something that we can't allow them to do because we consider it so safe. And we can't run away because that's our kid. We have to continue to be there. So we are stuck in the second best thing in order to make that dangerous experience go away. And that's to fight our kid and to suppress that expression of something that we consider something unsafe. And that's when our anger comes out. So the child has got no idea what's hit them. They've got no idea what they've done wrong, because all they're doing, and remember the child is that entire balloon, they have both sides or all sides of that balloon. Suddenly their parent is going apeshit on them because of how they're being. Now, our personalities were formed within an environment that did that to us. We're completely blind to this. Almost no one who is not incredibly familiar with the kind of shadow work that Debbie Ford does and that I've been developing onward is familiar with these dynamics. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're feeling that need to get away from your child, or you find that you're attacking your child through anger, sarcasm, passive aggression, criticism, these are manifestations of this dynamic where your nervous system is perceiving what I call an emotional or a psychological threat. The remedy for this is quite a challenging one, because what it means is going in to the patterning that's inside our neural networks and reconditioning our brain so that the things that are in the blue, the things that were once unacceptable for us to do, now slowly become integrated. Now, our nervous system is going to say, you can't do that. You can't embrace that part of you that's a pervert. even though every one of us has that. You can't embrace that part of you that's a tyrant. We all have that, because without our perversion, we couldn't have our straight side. Without our tyrant, we couldn't have our gentleness. So those pieces, like the yin and yang symbol, have to coexist. We can, and this is a process that I've went through, this is the process that I'm describing that is shifting my relationship with my daughter, that ability to go in there and start reclaiming those disowned parts of ourselves by realizing that there's an appropriate time to be a tyrant. There's an appropriate time to be perverse. And if you're struggling with the word perverse, remember, anybody who was homosexual was considered in Western culture or dominant Western cultures to be perverse a couple of years ago. These things are shifting attitudes that we have to ideas of how a person needs to be, and all of them go back to whether or not we're going to be accepted or not accepted within society. So I hope that this is helpful to you. And I would invite anybody who's interested in doing so to send me questions or challenges that you have in your life that I can address in a similar way. My website is www.b-loops.com. And I have an online course that I would strongly encourage everyone to take, called Peering Into Our Unconscious Minds, and you'll find that on the website, a link to that. So thank you very much for joining me, and this has been Philip Be'er.